Games rated E to T. Welcome to Nintendo Power Podcast. This episode we talk to the creators of Overcooked 2 and remember Nintendo Power Magazine on its 30th anniversary. My name is Chris Slate. Joining me today are Doug Bowser, Head of Sales and Marketing at Nintendo of America, and Katie Casper from the Publisher and Developer Relations Group. Thanks for coming on the show.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah. All right, so let's get started with Pros Picks, which is where we recommend games that we've been enjoying lately. And I don't know about you guys, but there's been a lot of games that I've been juggling lately. So, Doug, why don't you start us off? What have you been spending your time with?
Well, that's just the problem. There's been a lot of games lately. So I've been bouncing between Super Mario Odyssey, where I have 31 moons until I finish the game completely. Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze. Donkey Kong was my first game I ever played, so I'm going back to my roots. But I've been setting those aside lately and playing a little bit more of Mario Tennis Aces, which is a lot of fun, both just even going through the adventure mode or playing with friends in tournaments. I've been dabbling in Fortnite, but I got to tell you, I've got a lot of work to do. And then I have recently just picked up a Captain Toad treasure tracker, and I've been playing a couple levels there. Super, super fun.
Good stuff. If you start to figure out some good tips for Fortnite, you're going to have to teach me because my first match was pretty pathetic.
Yeah, I've been playing solo primarily, and I've learned that YouTube can truly be your friend and help you out quite a bit to get started.
That's a good tip. Because basically I killed myself in the first match. Never even got in any combat. Just like fell off a high area and then crawled to my death. So got a ways to go on that one. And then Katie, what have you been playing?
So I'm usually a pretty monogamous gamer. I like to dedicate my time to one game outside of work. But lately I've been dabbling in quite a few like Doug. So I played the Arena of Valor beta last week, which scratched my strategy itch that I often have. Mm-hmm. And before that, I was actually able to go to CEO 2018, and I was able to play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate again. I had the beach steps away from my hotel, but I willingly stood on cement floors 10 hours a day, 3 days in a row, to play Smash. And sadly, people didn't really want me to play with them very much, I found. But I did get to study a lot, so that was a pretty awesome set of work days for me. And other than that, I started Hollow Knight this past weekend. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to play that yet.
No.
Yeah, I've put probably about 30 hours into that game already.
No, not yet.
Oh, okay, so you're a lot further in than I am. I just reached the fungal wastes area. Mm-hmm. And, that's, overall that area is a nightmare for me because mushrooms are pretty much like the warts of the earth. So it's a struggle for me, one, to get through it. But I've played a few hours and I'm really liking it. I'm finding that the game is created with such a sense of style. You can really tell that Team Cherry had a really clear vision of what sort of experience they wanted gamers to have.
Yeah, I keep getting further and further into it, and it's the progression is. I mean, it's a very fresh take on this idea, but the progression, kind of you can loosely describe it as like a Metroid game. These kind of big subterranean mazes, and you're kind of uncovering more and more of the world as you go. But there's so much new stuff in it, and what I'm constantly amazed by is that, this is an indie game. This isn't a major, AAA developer with those kinds of resources making this game, but yet this game still has so much content and is so polished that I can have played it for 30 hours already and still have no idea really how close I am to the end because it just keeps going and going, and there's just so many cool bosses and so many cool abilities that you get. So I'm having a blast not really knowing where it ends or knowing even what the overall kind of goal is in some cases. You're just kind of learning as you go, and so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really find myself getting lost deeper and deeper in the depths of Hollow Knight every time I visit, and everything works in really great harmony. It has really fantastic music, story, art style. And I mean, for you're 30 hours in, I'm 5 hours in, but I should probably be, as far as my progress, I should only be maybe 2 hours in, but I tend to putz around a lot in these types of games without a map at my disposal. So whenever I jump into a new area, I'm always looking for Cornifer. He's the resident cartographer.
Mm-hmm.
Best friend, and he's helping me get through this game.
Yeah, you can hear him humming when you enter an area, and you're like, "Oh, where's he at?
Oh
He's got to be
God,
close."
I love that hum.
Chris, your comment about the quality of the game, it's incredible on Nintendo Switch. If you look at the indie titles that have been released, it's not just about the breadth; it's about the depth that you also see in these games. And you're right; they're great quality and tons of fun.
Yeah, it seems like, not that long ago, an indie game kind of stood for, oh, this is great for what a small team, or even in a lot of cases, one person could make. Now the bar keeps getting raised higher and higher, and some of the biggest reasons to own a platform like Nintendo Switch is just all of these great indie content. So, I feel like I find some way to say Shovel Knight in every single episode of the podcast. So
there you go.
I figured it out again here. But these kinds of games, Mario, Zelda, these franchises are always going to be my favorite. But a lot of times I'll play these kinds of games just as much as those. So.
Yeah, that's great.
And the other, other than Hollow Knight, the game that started to eat into my Hollow Knight time is Octopath Traveler. And that is a game that kind of feels simultaneously modern and fresh, but still has that visual style that really links it back to the old school, like Super NES RPGs. And I've been kind of a guy that initially, back in the day, I played a lot of RPGs, especially on Super NES. But for one reason or another, I've kind of fallen out of the genre, and maybe it's just because I don't have as much time to sink 100 hours into these kinds of games anymore. But I really looked at this game as an opportunity to get back into it, and because it has those it pulls at my nostalgic heartstrings, making me remember those older games, and I've gotten exactly what I've wanted so far. It feels kind of like a back to basics RPG. Not that it's simple or limited at all. I mean, there's a ton of content there you can dig in, but the presentation and the progression and everything is just paced really well and balanced really beautifully. And so I've been really enjoying kind of getting my RPG legs back with that game and discovering the stories of the 8 different characters.
Yeah, I agree with you on the presentation. I'm not much of an RPG player, but I had a chance to demo it a couple of weeks ago up in Treehouse, and it is absolutely stunning, the art style. Now, if I were to pick a Traveler, which one should I pick as a kind of a rookie RPG player?
Ooh, well, that's a tough one, but they all have great stories. Personally, my favorite story so far, and I have 7 of the 8 in my party, is Primrose. I think her story, it's kind of on the darker side, and she was actually, you could play the first chapter of her story in the demo that came out previously. But I find her story very interesting, and then also, but I'm trying to blank on his name right now, but the more traditional kind of fighter, knight type character is always going to be kind of your tank in battle.
Right.
So he's a great one to kind of put a lot of effort into leveling up early, and he has a cool story too, but mainly he's my go-to in combat. So he's maybe the one to start with.
All right, good.
Yeah. Yeah, and one other game I want to make a quick mention of is this game called Miles and Kilo. It's a very simple game. It's I can't remember the exact price, but it's a really good deal. But it's a spiritual successor of sorts, in my mind at least, to the old kind of NES games, the Adventure Island series.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of running forward the whole time, a little bit like Super Mario Run in a way. But it has an 8-bit aesthetic, and it's this game where it's a lot of like pattern memorization and puzzle solving in a way. So if you ever just want to turn your brain off and kind of go into that zone that you get with like a P-Cross game or something like that, I really enjoyed that one.
So more puzzling than platforming, or a little bit of both?
It's actually the thing it tests most is your timing and quick reflexes.
Okay.
But it's a lot of like I've got to dash under this, hop off of this snake's head, swing on this vine, then dodge the boulder, and you do a lot of dying and repetition. But the levels themselves you can beat in like 30 seconds if you know the pattern.
Right.
So it is just it kind of tickles that part of your brain that just likes doing putting a puzzle together.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this is the first I'm hearing of this title, and with that title, Miles and Kilo, is there some sort of metric system versus imperial system integration?
Actually, Miles is the boy, and Kilo's his dog.
Okay.
And depending on the level, sometimes the dog's kind of pulling you behind him on the leash, and it changes the mechanics a little bit. But yeah, I think the theme of the game is the distance traveled, so the title is very appropriate.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it's really good. Check it out. All right, so now, still early in the show, but I'm going to test you guys with the Warp Zone quiz. Now, normally this is where I would get you guys to guess games that came out 10, 20, and 30 years ago, but I don't know if you know, but this month, actually, July marks the 30th anniversary of when the very first issue of Nintendo Power Magazine came out.
Ooh.
Actually, that first issue was cover dated July, August. I think originally they didn't come out monthly. So we're going to be celebrating that a little bit this episode, theming some of the usual sections after Nintendo Power. So what I want to do with the Warp Zone quiz is quiz you guys and see if you can guess which games appeared on the cover of Nintendo Power Magazine 10, 20, and 30 years ago. So
Good luck to us
a little bit
both,
challenging.
Wow. Okay, here we go.
All right, so 10 years ago, this is the July 2008 issue of Nintendo Power. The clues are, and by the way, I'll take just the series. You don't necessarily need to give me the exact game here. But this particular game was on Nintendo DS, and it's from a gothic action platforming series from Konami that first became popular on the NES and was whipped into an animated series on Netflix not too long ago. So any guesses as to what this series?
Castlevania.
That's right. The exact game was
Well done.
Castlevania Order of Ecclesia.
Well done. That was not on my list of possible titles.
It was, once he got at me with the puns, I heard him loud and clear.
I do what I can to help out the guests, but I don't think you would have needed it. So this next one is going to be 20 years ago. This was on the cover of the July 1998 issue. And again, the series is just fine here. This N64 game was published by Acclaim Sports and comes from a multiplayer franchise that was huge on that system. And the game featured special moves with names like the Sharpshooter, Sweet Chin Music, Pedigree, or the Rock Bottom. Any guesses as to what the game or the series could be?
And this is N64?
Mm-hmm.
In Acclaim Games.
So I'm trying to think of the sports titles. And
or sports entertainment titles, one could say.
Oh, okay. So this is, in my head, I wanted it to be Charles Barkley, Shut Up and Jam, but I don't think we're going there. I want to say it's a WWF title.
That's right. But, I give you a lot of credit for remembering that there was a Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam game.
I know.
Special request.
Yeah, this was WWF Warzone. And, the WWF and WCW games back on the N64 were huge. My personal favorite was WWF No Mercy. But, yep, good one.
WCW.
Katie 2, Doug 0.
I'll hold back. I was a huge fan of wrestling as a kid, so I had WCW and WO Revenge. And
nice.
That was well frequented on my Nintendo 64.
No, you keep going. You're on a roll now. So if you can get all three,
The hat trick.
it's the hat trick. Let's see here.
All right, well, we'll find out. 30 years ago, this is the very first issue of Nintendo Power. Again, like I said, the July-August 1988 issue. And this one I am going to require the exact name of this title. This is a sequel to an iconic game. This sequel was very different than the original. It featured 4 main characters and let you pull turnips out of the ground. And spoiler alert, the entire game was actually a dream. So what was the game that was on the very first issue of Nintendo Power?
Super Mario
A lot of
Brothers
looking
2.
back.
2.
2?
That's
Yeah,
right.
Thank you, Doug, with the assist.
There was a lot of back and forth between you guys deciding who was going to answer.
Well, I
That's
kind of
right.
wanted to get the hat trick, but
It's a tie.
we did it
It
together.
still
Yeah.
counts. Super Mario Brothers 2.
2.
The turnips is evolutionary in platforming times.
Yeah, I
And-
noticed, when you were talking about Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze and playing that lately, they brought that mechanic back.
They did.
Because Mr. Tanabe, who worked on that game, worked on Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze as well.
Yeah.
So I love that. I just love yanking things out of the
that's so
ground
cool.
and throwing them at people.
And you'll get a little bit of that in Captain Toad also.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some turnips in there as well.
That's right. I see you brought a copy of the very first issue with you.
Yeah, we have it here on the table. A little worn, but not bad for 30 years old. This was the one I actually, I believe this is the one I actually received, when I was a kid with my charter subscription. I had been a subscriber to a Nintendo Fun Club, which was the newsletter that they used to have for, I would say, I can't remember exactly, maybe 8 to 10 issues before Nintendo Power started. And I guess I can say this now. I had signed up for several different free Nintendo Fun Club subscriptions under various aliases. And therefore I
Sneaky.
got about 6 copies of Nintendo Power #1 sent to me when that started.
That's great.
And this is the one that survived.
It's in beautiful shape, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, now we're going to move on to Player's Pulse. And in honor of the Nintendo Power anniversary, what we did was we went on Twitter this month and we asked Nintendo fans to ask any questions they might have about the magazine. Now, I was editor-in-chief of the magazine for 5 years back during the Wii era. So, maybe I can answer a few of these. The first one comes from, am I going to pronounce this right? Lilatroid, which I can only imagine is a reference to Star Fox. What was your favorite part of Nintendo Power magazine? Well, let me start with you guys. What when I say Nintendo Power, I don't know, what comes to mind?
So for me, I really enjoyed a few different sections. Player's Pulse was always something I liked to frequent just because it was interesting to see what other fans like me were saying, and also to see how editors would respond in a really savvy way to sometimes some off-kilter questions. And I also really liked the art that was showcased in those sections, because at a certain point in my life, in my head, I was going to be a concept artist for Nintendo. So I had to gauge kind of what the scene was out, like the competition out there. So I liked that section. And strangely enough, I always remember the ads as well. Those were,
Oh, yeah.
like the self-published ads, like they were always really sassy, like saying that you don't need chicken soup when you're sick, you need Nintendo Power. I remember one where it was like if you didn't have Nintendo Power, it like implied that you could get run over by a bus and become like tire jam. It was just like all this like funny like 90s silly humor that as a kid I was like, yeah, they're right. I don't want to be tire jam. I better have the player's guide for this. So I just like the way that it spoke to the readers.
Yeah, I love how those old issues are like a time capsule. You see a lot of like cool kids with jean jackets and backwards baseball caps on playing their rad new Nintendo games.
I'm looking through it right now, and that's clearly the depiction I see. For me, Chris, the thing that I loved was, I just mentioned earlier that to help me get started in Fortnite, I had to check out a few YouTube videos. This is the equivalent of that in print version.
Exactly.
So it was a great opportunity for me to look at maps and find ways to get around tough areas, and that was the value I got out of it.
Mm-hmm. And along the lines of the maps, I used to really enjoy the classified information section, which is where you had all the cheat codes.
Right.
And you don't really get those so much anymore. I think what you used to get from cheat codes is basically DLC now. But I used to love finding out how to get skip to different levels or unlock sound test modes, things like that. And
tell the truth. Did you skip to different levels?
Oh, yes.
Oh, right.
I mean, I tried to go back and beat the games legitimately, but of course, if someone says, hey, you can just skip to the last, you can skip to World 8-1 in Super Mario Brothers, you've got to give it a try. Yeah. And when I worked on the magazine, actually, the section that I really liked the most and was kind of the most proud of, because our team got to really add it to the magazine, was we reworked the intro section of the book to include a lot more just fun stuff for the fans, primarily for ourselves, and thankfully the readers liked them as well. We called the section Power Up, so it had some traditional news articles, but we also put in spotlights on Nintendo gaming superstars. The original Warp Zone was there, which looked back at games that came out 1020. Actually, I don't think it was 10/20/30 at that point because it was a while back, but different increments of time. And then we even got to have whenever you can put a little sidebar in there called Dodongo Dislikes, which is the most nerdy reference ever to the original Legend of Zelda. You've made it, I suppose. Next letter is from Isaac Brown. He asks, what is your favorite article from Nintendo Power? Well, as a kid, I liked the Legend of Zelda Second Quest feature, which in the first issue had a big fold-out map and also just revealed the fact that there was a whole other quest in this game that you didn't know about. And then again, as an editor-in-chief, we got to work on a feature for the 250th issue called 250 Reasons to Love Nintendo. That was just a big excuse to just throw in everything we ever like. Our big personal, as myself and all the other writers, love letters back to Nintendo. So that was a lot of fun. And then from David H. Brown, he asks, I would love to see the Nintendo Power Awards. What games of the year would have been during NP's non-existence? So the magazine ended in 2012, so we're thinking it's been a few years since then. What are some of the games that might have been in contention for that coveted Nintendo Power Game of the Year award?
Wow. Well, you just look at this last year, Chris, and I mean, how could you not nominate Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey? But going back a few years, I think Splatoon deserves to be up there also because it's a new piece of IP that has really kind of redefined kind of fun competitive gaming. And I think it would have to be up on the list.
Yeah, I'm surprised
Absolutely.
how much time Splatoon sucked out of my life because, it for me, a new IP, there's always a little bit of hesitance as far as how you're going to like it. Everyone has fun in different ways. But, as soon as I started playing that Splatoon multiplayer and playing cooperatively, playing competitively, I'm pretty sure I sunk well over 200-300 hours into that game.
Wow.
So, yeah, that game just came out of nowhere and surprised me, and I still think about it. I mean, luckily we've got Splatoon 2, so we don't need to think, we can play.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And it's fun to see how far the game's come in the last few years also.
Absolutely.
Some other games that popped off to me, and I just took a very kind of brief look back at the years since the magazine ended. In 2013, just off the top there, you had Super Mario 3D World, Fire Emblem Awakening, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, and Animal Crossing New Leaf. So I don't know what we would have picked that year. Then 2014, you had Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS. Plus, you had Mario Kart 8 and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Mario Kart 8 probably would have won out for me, just because Mario Kart's like my favorite racing series.
You've got some
ever.
pretty mad skills.
Yeah. I'm not a great Super Smash Bros. Player. I'm not necessarily a great Splatoon player, but I've leveled up in Mario Kart 8.
Well, and be honest, you are the office champ.
Well, thanks for bringing that up, Doug. I wasn't going to say it myself. Two-time champion.
I'm going to have to come down there and visit.
Hey, you already sent your emissary, and I defeated him. So I'll talk to you about that later. And then 2015, for me, it would have absolutely been Super Mario Maker. I just love that game. And then 2016, Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon, I think probably would have had a good shot at it. And then, Doug, like you said last year, I don't know how we would have chosen between Super Mario Odyssey and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's the impossible choice right there for me. But, a little insight into how we chose those awards as well. It was, the whole team would get together and we would kind of each come up with our own individual lists. And then we had this whole formula where we would weight, assign points to if you gave a game your first spot, your second spot, third spot, and so on. And we would use that to generate what supposedly is a list that combined all of our opinions. And then that list, instead of being the final list, would be the starting off point for our debates. And it would get pretty heated because, as you can imagine, we each had our favorite franchises and games that we thought really deserved the spotlight.
And how many of you?
I'd say editorially, not counting like art directors and designers who would also chime in as well. And when I was there, it'd probably be about a handful of people.
Okay.
And then sometimes we'd also bring in some of the freelance writers as well. If they had a certain expertise, we wanted to make sure it was reflected in the list. But that was a lot of fun. But like I said, a lot of fun debates.
Yeah.
So next up from Brandon Alvello asks, will Nestor ever return in some form? I don't know if you guys are familiar with Nestor. There was a recurring comic strip that from time to time would appear in Nintendo Power, would disappear for a while, come back, featuring this kid, Nestor, and he knew everything about video games. And they would sneak little gameplay tips into those. And I was lucky enough to have been able to write a couple of those, including the final Nestor strip that appeared in the last issue of Nintendo Power. And I love the character. He had his own Virtual Boy game called Nestor's Funky Bowling, but no, unfortunately, there's no plans for Nestor to come back. We could say that Nestor's here with us now in this new version of Nintendo Power. Of course, you can't see him.
So yeah.
I mean,
but just
he's partially here within you, Chris.
I think, there's a little bit of alter ego in there. So.
Well, I think there's a beautiful message there. Nestor is a part of all of us as Nintendo
Oh,
fans,
absolutely.
so he's always here. Or if you want, you can just imagine him playing Funky Bowling over there in the corner while we're recording the show.
Let's get that in the graphic.
Exactly. All right, well, now I want to get to game forecast. We're going to take a quick look at some of the new games coming out over the next few weeks. For Nintendo Switch, we've got Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1 and 2 on July 24th, Go Vacation on July 27th, Overcooked 2 on August 7th, Okami HD on August 9th, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate on August 28th, and then WarioWare Gold on August 8th for Nintendo 3DS.
Is there one you're looking forward to?
Well, there's a few of these actually. I don't know if I might have to turn in my gamer passport or something, whatever here, if I admit this, but I've never played any version of Okami. And I know it's always looked like a beautiful game. I've heard that the gameplay is an adventure game, kind of like The Legend of Zelda. It seems right up my alley, and so I'm looking at this as my opportunity to finally right that wrong.
Yeah. Oh, Chris,
you're
going to like
Overcooked 2 for me.
Yeah. Well, it's several on this list. That's definitely there as well.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have. I think there's so many different games and so many well-acclaimed games. Okami, Chris, you've got to play it.
Yeah,
you're gonna get
hype.
lost in that world, and then you're gonna think it's over, and then you're only 30% done.
Oh, really? Sounds like the kind of game I need to get to for sure after I finish Octopath Traveler.
I was just going to say, I don't know when I'll see you again, Chris.
Yeah. And then WarioWare Gold. I'm a big fan of the WarioWare series. Cool.
Yeah, WarioWare, I remember the first game on Game Boy. That one really surprised me, just how novel the concept was. So I'm looking forward to going back and revisiting the WarioWare world again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't get enough of those wacky characters. I still want 9-Volt to get more of the spotlight as a fellow gamer geek.
I want them all to get their spotlight. I just remember they all had their own different micro game section, and I just loved visiting. There was one I remember on Game Boy where it was you were driving, going from one mini game to the other with the windshield wipers, and God, the music was so good. I think I'm gonna. There's so many great games coming out this month, but I may go back to the original WarioWare for a little bit.
Oh, well,
you've got time.
Yeah, I think I got a little time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, guys, Doug and Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show, and it's been great having you here.
Well, thanks for having us. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Now joining me from the UK are Phil Duncan and Olie Devine from Ghost Town Games, the developers of Overcooked Special Edition and the upcoming Overcooked 2 for Nintendo Switch. Guys, thanks for calling in.
Thanks, yeah, thanks so much.
Great. Now let's start with Overcooked Special Edition. Now this game came out last year and has continued to be a big hit, and it's a very different kind of game. Can you describe the basic gameplay for anyone listening who maybe hasn't had a chance to play it yet?
Sure, yeah. I guess I'll just jump in. So Overcooked is a cooperative cooking game. So the idea is that you are controlling chefs in a kitchen. There's 1 to 4 players, and it's all about sort of dividing up all the various tasks that you get in a kitchen. So you'll be grabbing ingredients and preparing them and cooking them and serving them out to the restaurant. But we have all kinds of crazy different kitchens that you find yourself in the campaign. So we've got ones that are on a pirate ship or an iceberg or in a haunted house. And basically it's a game all about teamwork. So it's a game about trying to work together to break up all those little tasks and trying to serve the food in as efficient a way as possible. That'll do it.
Yeah.
Right, and this game can be played from 1 to 4 players, but it seems like the more players you bring in and the more chaotic it gets, kind of the more fun it is.
I think the more people you get, the more crazy it gets. So I think Overcooked is kind of at its best when things are slightly going wrong. I certainly enjoy it slightly more when things are going slightly wrong. And the kitchens, as the game goes on, get more dramatic in the sense that there's more fire gets involved. You get more things sliding around the levels. You get things sinking and bits of the level falling off and all that kind of stuff. And we've tried to sort of amp up that level of chaos in the sequel as well to try and get more and more that you have to overcome as a team.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? The more players you add, then the more you need to communicate, because you've got more little people to keep an eye on, and that's why it just seems even more chaotic. Even though, in theory, you should be able to do a lot more in the time with that many people.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, the kitchens change wildly and have a lot of kind of arcade-style elements, from conveyor belts to shifting layouts. But no matter what situation or no matter what kind of kitchen you're going into, what would you say are some core, key tips for new players? Just things that you want to be thinking when you start to play this game.
Well, I think a big thing is that you need to be able to communicate well as to what tasks you're going to be taking on, and like you need to be telling people, oh, I need those onions, you need to pass those to me. Because the thing we found a lot with people watching people play the games, it doesn't necessarily matter how good at games you are. It definitely matters most how good at communicating you are and how good you are at functioning as a team. Because Overcooked is very much a game where everyone has something to do all the time simultaneously. So you have to kind of be independent and doing your own thing, but telling people what you're doing and asking for help and when you need it.
Yeah, I'd also say I've seen a few people play the game where like they have 4 chefs playing the game, and then they have somebody else who's just watching as the head chef, which seems to work really well. So someone who's just at the back, kind of sort of directing everyone.
Right. Now, switching to Overcooked 2, which is coming out on August 7th, what are some of the new features that fans can look forward to?
Wow. Well, we have a whole heap of new features. I mean, that was kind of the impetus for creating the game, was we had all these things that we didn't quite manage to get into Overcooked, basically because there was only 2 of us working on it. This time we've teamed up with Team 17, who published the first game, and they're now helping us with the development. So they were able to like bring to life a lot of these ideas that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Online multiplayer is the big new feature that we've added for this game. It was the thing that people were crying out for with the original game. So that's something we're really glad we've been able to bring to the game. Is like being able to have people play the game with friends who live in like other countries or other states. That's one of the features.
Or just like 2 switches next to each other in the same room.
Yeah, or that. Feeling lazy.
Yeah. And then the other one's dynamic levels. So we've got these levels where so the first dynamic level is this hot air balloon that crashes into a sushi kitchen. We have a whole bunch of levels where the level will transition from one set of recipes to another set of recipes as the level kind of shifts and changes shape. And that was something we really wanted to do in the first game, but because the first game was just the 2 of us making it, and this new game is like a good old team of people. We've worked with Team 17 on this one. We've been able to just do way more artistically and like code-wise, which is why I've been able to do the networking and the dynamic levels and a lot of our recipes and new like mechanics that we wanted to do in the first game.
Yeah. And then we've been able to add, more chefs, there's more levels, there's more mechanics.
Yeah.
The art's had a complete overhaul. Yeah, basically more is the watchword. We've just been able to add so much more to Overcooked 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new chefs are getting pretty outrageous too.
Oh yeah, we haven't held back for the design for the new chefs.
Now, one of the interesting things that I found with the original Overcooked, and I think that's going to be coming back in this one as well, is people might not expect it when you initially describe what kind of game this is, but there's a story, and the story is pretty out there. Can you talk a little bit about the setup for Overcooked 2?
Right, yeah. So this was kind of like pun first development a little bit. So we started with the premise of, so Overcooked 1 had this story of the ever peckish who was kind of coming to destroy the world, and you had to satiate his hunger. So we started being like, what could be a setup for Overcooked 2 that had the same level of drama? And we ended up coming towards the unbread, which are these undead walking bread toast monsters. the only thing resurrection of the grave by reading from the fabled Necronomicon, and your mission on Overcooked 2 is to be able to learn all the recipes and techniques you need in order to be able to satiate the hunger of the unbread in order to save the Kingdom again.
Yeah, the outrageous story is something that we added to the first game because we wanted to make it obvious from the off that this wasn't just your everyday cooking game. This wasn't like Cooking Mama or something. This isn't something where you're just in a wholesome kitchen. This is going to get nuts. This is going to be ridiculous. So we were like, okay, we're going to hit people over the head with that from the off. So that's why the first game opened with the apocalypse, and we're like, well, we've got to, why break the habit of a lifetime, right, with the second game?
Yeah, I think every game has to start with an apocalypse. I think that's just how the game works.
Yeah.
So it's an apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic cooking game.
Mid-apocalyptic.
Mid-apocalyptic. Trying to stave off the apocalypse.
Medium-level apocalypse.
One thing I want to note for everyone listening is that, it's maybe a little hard to picture if you've never played this game before exactly what it looks like, but there was a great segment that Phil and Olie, you both appeared in for Nintendo Treehouse Live at E3, where you guys on stage played the game and demoed Overcooked 2, and I really recommend anyone to find it on YouTube and check it out. It's a really great example of what the game is all about. Now, I also wanted to ask if there's going to be any exclusive features for the Nintendo Switch version of the game.
Yes, yeah. So the game is now available for pre-order. So we have there's a pack that you can get for pre-order, which includes 5 new chefs for the game, But for Nintendo Switch, we also have a exclusive chef, which is the Platypus Chef.
Yeah, which is actually one of my favourites. I really like the design of the Platypus Chef. It's just really great.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask, these games, as people can imagine, they're wild to play. Are they wild to make? I mean, what's that development process like? And do you have any fun stories from development of either game?
They're a tricky game to make when there's only two of you.
Yeah.
Is what I'd say from the off. So the first game we really struggled. I didn't even know why we got it in our heads that it would be a really good idea to make a 4-player game when there's just the two of us.
Yeah.
But we certainly have lots of stories of us both holding 2 pads and trying to juggle them.
So recording the trailer was a nightmare because there were only 2 of us, and we had to set it up so that each joystick would move a different chef, and then we were trying to coordinate a scripted sequence of things that needed to happen in the trailer. There was this one shot which panned across where there was one player chopping and another player picking up a pot, and then he walked across and followed them, and then it encountered another chef putting on something on it. It was just an absolute nightmare. It took a good day to do all of the recording of that, and it was just take after take after take on also really old PCs at the time, because we didn't have any money, so we had to borrow a friend's computer, and it wouldn't run with the capture software, and we had to keep stopping it and be no, that stalls, that didn't work. We had to record at half speed. Everything had to be done at half speed and then sped up.
So that was
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when it came to actually getting proper playtesting, we had to rope in friends and relatives, basically just bribing them to come around to the house and play the game while we just sat there with a notepad.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, the game's so psychological because it involves multiple people cooperating that you don't know what levels are going to be difficult and what levels are going to be easy until you have 4 people playing it. So you basically just we had to get people playing it constantly. We had to take it to little conventions, but for this one we had to sort of have Team 17's user research department constantly basically having people in and recording videos of these people playing and being oh, that doesn't work and that didn't work.
That's too complicated. They're getting very angry now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, they're throwing that controller on the floor. Yeah. They're crying. And we had a lot of friends over and just trying to hammer through the game on this one.
Yes, it's quite an intense.
Yeah.
Intense development.
It's very
process.
iterative. It's iterative development.
That's a better word.
What's it been like starting with the original Overcooked compared to now with Overcooked 2? You've the first game has had the success and now has a broad fan base, and you mentioned working with Team 17 this time. How has developing this new game been different than the first game?
I guess the big difference, right, is just the starting point. The fact that we've got the first game to build off. When we were making the first game, so much of it was making up as we go along and breaking a lot of eggs. I keep using food analogies, so I'm just going to scrap that one. But basically that we made a lot of mistakes, and we'd refined all the rough edges, and we'd got to the core of the game as we liked it. And it kind of felt like once we'd done that, we only had a few months left to make the game. So this time around, it's no, we've got the core game. Now let's just build on it. Let's add all the features that we had to scrap.
We actually got to polish this one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
The first one was very much up until the very end of development was just we can get everything in time. We ran out of money completely over the course of the first development. And this one we've actually been able to start from a position of, okay, what we in our dreams of what would be in an Overcooked game, rather than trying to work out even how a cooking game would work as a co-op game, which is our whole task with the first game.
And we definitely need to call out Team 17 because they were just fantastic to work with. It was so good being able to share the load with them. So their art department's done a really good job to just completely polish up the art style that we had from the first game and just build on that. The design team has put together some really fantastic new levels and come up with some really good ideas.
The music was also really good.
Olie
did a really good job. Because obviously our first game we didn't have an in-house composer, but now we have an in-house composer, so we could do our own soundtrack for every level, and that's been really nice.
Yeah, it's been really nice just talking with them and sort of coming up with ideas and just building on that first game.
Yeah, bouncing ideas between the two places was great. There's a real process there of oh, this isn't quite, this is kind of dragging in the middle, and this is oh, this isn't quite working here, and we can add some stuff there, and that was very organic and fun to do this time.
Mm-hmm. And what has the process been like bringing the series to Nintendo Switch?
Good, actually. I mean, so once so obviously the game already was working on Nintendo Switches in the first place for the first game, and so we started from a position of, okay, we've got a game that runs very well on Switch, and now what can we do to sort of bring that up graphically, and what can we do to improve that. And it's a really nice console for local co-op play in the first place, and it's a really fun console to play the game on. It's really fun to demo the game with the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah,
I find.
I really like the fact as well that we've just got such a really great fan base on Nintendo Switch.
Yeah,
I like the fact that the players really took to Overcooked 2 on Switch, and we just get so many fantastic emails from people, from just, what I really like is we keep getting stories from people who are saying, like, I've been a gamer my whole life, but finally this is a game that I can play with my wife or my husband who doesn't play games. Like, finally I've got something that we can share together. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, and that's been a big thing for us, because one of the things we really wanted for Overcooked was to be this bridging game between players who maybe played lots of video games and players who hadn't played that many video games. And that was something that we were really able to get on Switch, because a lot of people have that game out in the world and you'll be playing it with your family or whatever, and it's very because it's so portable, it's very accessible. So you can be like meeting some friends, or you'd go on a train journey somewhere, and then you'd be like, we'll just play some Overcooked, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I've seen so many photos from people playing in airports.
Yeah, that's
in tower rooms
in the world.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to be. You mentioned different types of players or people getting others into the game. It does seem to be this perfect mix where someone like me who plays a ton of games, I kind of approach it almost as a fast kind of arcade style game. But then you can have, it also has this appeal to almost like a board game kind of party night where you might have a bunch of friends over and even non-gaming friends could get into it from that way. So in that way, it seems to be like a good mix of styles that has a lot, for a lot of different types of players.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that was something we really tried to do. I think part of that was just keeping the controls simple.
Yeah.
Because so much of making a game accessible to people who play games that much is that the controls can be very intimidating when you play a game for the first time. And our game is really just a joystick and 2 buttons.
Yeah, there was definitely a point, wasn't there, at the start where we were like, you know what, if we could make it like a twin stick game, so you're moving in one direction with one stick and then you're aiming with the other. But ultimately, I think it's when we took it to some of our first conventions and we had younger players pick it up and just go launch straight into the game, to the point where they were, explaining to other adults how they should be playing the game.
Yes.
I thought, okay, that's something we need to aim for. That's something that we should embrace.
Yeah, to hold on to that. And yeah, we've managed to add some features to the new game. So we've got throwing in the new game, which is something that I think will allow a lot more of that kind of speed running, high level gameplay. But we want that to still be accessible. It's still got this thing where it freezes you on the spot when you're aiming and that kind of stuff. Still kind of accessible to non-gamers. And we've tried to smooth out that difficulty curve in this game as well.
Yeah.
The first game was a bit harder at the beginning.
Definitely. A steep learning curve.
Yeah, I'm hoping the second game, if anything, will be more of a mix of people playing it. That's what I'm hoping for.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the challenges, especially early on, of balancing a 4-player game with just a couple of people. What's something that you learned once the first game, and maybe how this also impacted the development of the second game? What's something you learned when the game got out in the wild and you really saw how a lot of different people were playing it together?
I think people were a lot more into high scores than I expected them to be.
That's true.
Which is funny because in the first game I didn't feel that there was that much difference between scores you could get, and we've tried to make the second game a little bit more finally judged, changing the score system and making throwing a thing.
Yeah, so we've now changed the scoring system so that there's like a combo meter. So if you serve orders in the order that they come in, then you can actually build up a combo meter and get higher scores. We've also changed it so that when you deliver a meal, if it has fewer ingredients or fewer steps, you actually get less points for it. So you don't have this. One of the situations we found with the first game was that a lot of people would spam the really small orders because they could get the same amount of points and they could just rush through. So there'd just be some poor sucker who'd ordered like a burger with everything, had to wait 20 minutes for a meal.
Yeah. And then we had a lot of people asking for things. So we had a lot of people asking for we wish we could have sushi, we wish we could have cakes.
Yeah.
A lot of that went into the game. A lot of the features of Overcooked 2 are sort of determined by suggestions people have given us at conventions and things. And we were like, that would have been great. But when we were making Overcooked 1, we were so desperate to just get the thing finished. Because we were to the very end. And this one we were able to add all of that stuff finally.
Like sushi, for example, was something that we had in the original game but had to cut. Throwing again was something we'd experimented with but had to cut.
It was in our original really ropey trailer that we sent around. At the beginning, it was it's going to have all this stuff, it's going to be amazing. It's we had to cut that down a bit.
Oh, wait, yeah.
Showing our friends. Got down to my last £13.
You mentioned before about what the process was like working on the trailer, and I mentioned that you guys appeared on Treehouse Live at E3. Overcooked 2 was one of the bigger announcements at the show for me. What was it like kind of, coming from, I don't know how you felt, when you first put the original game out there and how much you may have expected kind of the success that it had, but certainly going into the show, you must have known that Overcooked 2 would be something that a lot of people would be very interested to hear about. So what's it like kind of going into the show and then being there and kind of being one of those big announcements that gets a lot of attention?
It's completely surreal. It's not something that we were, it's not even something that we were really expecting. I mean, we know that the game's had a level of success, but even up to that point, I don't think it really sort of sunk in just how aware people were of the game. So it's really strange going to E3, because we actually went 2 years ago with the first game, and we were sort of like street traders. We were just sat at the edge trying to get people to come and play the game, and we'd have to introduce them. Whereas this time we'd be like, oh yeah, we're making a game called Overcooked. And they'd be like, great, I've played it. And we're like, what? Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
this is our first time on the floor as well, because last time it was all behind closed doors and in like the little press room. And this time we got we were in the big Nintendo area, and that was kind of crazy because we had like this massive queue that went around. And it was just like, wow, people really want to play this. This is cool.
Yeah, unbelievable. And kind of scary as well. Like, we weren't allowed to talk about the game for such a long time before the announce. So I think it was just this huge wave of relief after the Treehouse Live, because suddenly we could tell people what we'd been up to.
We've had to be really secretive this time. Like the first game, because no one knew anything about what we were doing. Well, no one knew who we were, so it was just like super secret. Like, no, it has to be a secret. But this time we've had to be like, okay, if anyone hears about Overcooked 2 now, it'll be like on Twitter and like tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we need to be like really careful,
Right.
which is making it very difficult to like test it. Because obviously last time we could take it to random strangers, and now we've had to make it all indoors.
Everyone's got to sign NDAs. And
NDAs.
secret.
Yeah, we had schools testing it, and we
I'm
had
still-
kids sign NDA. I don't sign NDA.
Oh, wow.
The teacher probably said.
Yeah, time teacher maybe signed an NDA, but like kids have actually kept it secret.
Yeah,
yeah,
good on them.
yeah.
I don't remember having assignments that fun back when I was in school.
Yeah, right.
Well, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to, tell everyone about Overcooked 2? Anything that we may have missed?
Other than the fact that it is coming out on the 7th of August.
Yes.
It's very soon, just under a month's time.
Available for pre-purchase right now.
That's right.
And like you said, you get those nice little bonus characters if you do pre-purchase the game.
Yes.
Exactly.
And just that it's everything that, like, in terms of size, it's just everything we couldn't fit into the first game. It's massive now.
Yeah.
It's like more levels than the first game, plus all of its DLCs, like at the beginning. So it's like, it's a lot bigger and a lot more of an experience. So I hope people will really, really enjoy it.
Yeah. We hope you love it.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to spend a lot more time with the game. And Phil and Olie, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this episode of Nintendo Power Podcast. Once again, I'd like to thank our guests Phil Duncan, Olie Devine, Doug Bowser, and Katie Casper. If you have any comments or questions you'd like us to consider answering on the show, just shoot us an email at nintendopowerpodcast@noa.nintendo.com. Also, we always appreciate it if you can leave us a review. That helps the show get discovered by more people. And be sure to subscribe so you can get new episodes as soon as they're ready. Thanks for listening, and keep playing with power.